A millionaire demanded that a humble elderly man get off the plane because he stank of animals, but she had no idea who he really was. The bustling noise of Newark Liberty International Airport faded into the background as Vivian Hargrove strode purposefully through the first-class lounge. Her Louboutin heels clicked against the polished floor, turning heads with each step. At 55, Vivian was the epitome of upper-class sophistication. Her silver-streaked dark hair coiffed to perfection, her Chanel suit impeccably tailored. As she approached the check-in counter, Vivian's nose wrinkled in disgust. An elderly man in worn overalls and a plaid shirt stood there, his weathered hands gripping a first-class ticket. "I'm sorry, sir," the attendant was saying, "but your ticket seems to be in order. You're cleared for first-class boarding." Vivian cleared her throat loudly. "Excuse me," she interjected, her voice dripping with disdain. "There must be some mistake. This gentleman clearly doesn't belong in first class." The elderly man turned, his kind blue eyes meeting Vivian's icy stare. "Ma'am, I assure you, there's no mistake. I paid for this ticket, same as anyone else." Vivian's lip curled. "Paid for it? With what, chicken feed?" She turned to the attendant. "Surely you can't allow him to board. He smells like a barn." The attendant shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Hargrove, I understand your concern, but Mr. She glanced at the ticket. "Mr. Thompson has a valid first-class ticket. We can't deny him boarding." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." She pulled out her phone, manicured fingers flying over the screen. "Hello, Charles, it's Vivian. We have a situation here at Newark. Some farmer is trying to board first class. Yes, it's disgusting. I need you to call the airline executives immediately." Mr. Thompson's weathered face fell as he listened to Vivian's tirade. He turned to the attendant, his voice soft. "Miss, I don't want to cause any trouble. If it's going to be an issue, I can take another flight." The attendant opened her mouth to protest, but Vivian cut her off. "You heard him. He volunteers to take another flight. Problem solved." Within minutes, Vivian's influence had worked its magic. Mr. Thompson was escorted away from the first-class lounge, his dignity in tatters. As Vivian settled into her plush seat, she allowed herself a satisfied smirk. Little did she know that this moment of cruelty would set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. Miles away in a cozy cafe in downtown Manhattan, Vivian's daughter Sophia sat nervously fiddling with her latte. At 25, Sophia was the spitting image of her mother, dark hair, piercing green eyes, and delicate features. But where Vivian exuded cold sophistication, Sophia radiated warmth and compassion. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Sophia's face lit up. Jack Thompson walked in, his rugged good looks and easy smile, a stark contrast to the polished businessmen that usually populated Sophia's world. "Hey, beautiful," Jack said, leaning down to kiss Sophia's cheek. "Sorry I'm late. Dad needed some help with the tractor before I left." Sophia smiled, her heart fluttering. "No worries, I'm just glad you're here." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Jack, there's something I need to talk to you about." Jack's brow furrowed as he sat down. "Everything okay, Soph?" "More than okay," Sophia said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Jack, I think it's time we told our parents about us, about how serious we are." Jack's eyes widened. "Are you sure? I mean, I'm all for it, but Soph, you know my background. Your mom? She's not exactly the type to welcome a farmer's son with open arms." Sophia squeezed his hand. "I know. But Jack, I love you and I'm tired of hiding that. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." As the young couple sat in the cafe, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon, fate was already weaving its intricate web. For in that moment, Vivian Hargrove was settling into her first-class seat, congratulating herself on avoiding a flight with the very man whose son now held her daughter's heart. And somewhere over the Atlantic, an elderly farmer named Edward Thompson sat in economy class, his dreams of surprising his son with a first-class trip home dashed. But Edward had bigger concerns than a downgraded flight. As he gazed out the small window, at the clouds below, he thought of the doctor's words that still echoed in his mind. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. The disease is progressing faster than we anticipated. You may only have a few years left." Edward closed his eyes, pushing away the fear and focusing on his mission. He had work to do, important work that could revolutionize the agricultural industry. And more importantly, he had a legacy to secure for his son. Little did he know that his path would soon collide with the very people who had humiliated him, setting off a chain reaction that would shake the foundations of both families. As the plane soared through the sky, carrying its passengers towards their intertwined destinies, the stage was set for a drama that would unravel secrets, challenge prejudices, and ultimately teach them all the true meaning of family, love, and human dignity. 2 weeks after the airport incident, Vivian Hargrove sat in her opulent Upper East Side penthouse, sipping a glass of Chateau Margaux and scrolling through her social media. A frown creased her perfectly Botoxed forehead as she came across a photo of her daughter, Sophia, at some quaint farmer's market. Honestly, Vivian muttered, setting down her glass with a sharp clink. What is that girl thinking? Consorting with commoners. As if summoned by her mother's disapproval, Sophia breezed into the room, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Mom, I didn't know you were home. Vivian arched an eyebrow. Clearly, where have you been, darling? You look rustic. Sophia's smile faltered for a moment before she squared her shoulders. I was at the farmer's market, actually. It was wonderful. You should come with me next time. The fresh produce, the sense of community, it's amazing. I'll pass, Vivian said dryly. Sophia, darling, when are you going to start taking your position in society seriously? The charity gala is next week, and Harrison Worthington III has been asking about you. Sophia's face fell. Mom, I've told you I'm not interested in Harrison, or any of the men you keep trying to set me up with. Vivian leaned forward, her voice taking on a saccharine tone. Sweetheart, I'm only looking out for your future. You're a Hargrove. You have a legacy to uphold. As Sophia opened her mouth to argue, her phone buzzed. A smile lit up her face as she read the message. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Who's that? Oh, just a friend, Sophia said quickly, tucking her phone away. Listen, Mom, I have to go. But there's something I want to talk to you about later. It's important. Before Vivian could protest, Sophia was gone, leaving her mother staring after her with a mixture of suspicion and concern. Across town, in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, Jack Thompson paced nervously, running a hand through his tousled brown hair. His father, Edward, watched him with amusement. Son, you're going to wear a hole in the floor. Edward chuckled. What's got you so worked up? Jack stopped, turning to face his father. Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been seeing someone. It's serious. Edward's eyes lit up. Well, that's wonderful news. Who's the lucky girl? Jack took a deep breath. Her name is Sophia Hargrove. The smile faded from Edward's face. Hargrove? As in, Vivian Hargrove's daughter, yes, Jack finished. But Dad, she's nothing like her mother. She's kind, compassionate, down to earth. She loves the farm, loves the work we do. Edward stood, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Jack, I trust your judgment. But these people, they're from a different world, a world that looks down on folks like us. Jack nodded, his jaw set with determination. I know, Dad. But Sophia's different. We want to make this work. In fact, he paused, a mix of excitement and nervousness in his eyes. I'm thinking of asking her to marry me. Edward's eyebrows shot up. Marriage? Son, that's a big step. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Jack said firmly. We're planning to tell our families soon. I wanted you to be the first to know. As Edward pulled his son into a tight embrace, his mind raced. He thought of the snobbish woman on the plane, of the humiliation he'd endured. And now, by some twist of fate, his son was in love with that woman's daughter. But more than that, he thought of his failing health, of the precious time he had left. He hadn't told Jack about his diagnosis yet, not wanting to burden his son. But now, with this news, I'm happy for you, son, Edward said, his voice thick with emotion. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. As father and son shared this moment, neither could have imagined the storm that was brewing. For at that very moment, in a sleek office high above Manhattan, a man named Victor Blackwell was poring over documents, a predatory smile on his face. "Well, well, Edward Thompson," Victor murmured, his fingers tracing the outline of a complex agricultural patent. "You've been holding out on us, but not for long. Soon, everything you've worked for will be mine." The pieces were falling into place, the players moving into position for a drama that would test the bonds of family, the power of love, and the true nature of success. As the sun set over New York City, casting long shadows across the urban landscape, the stage was set for revelations that would shake both the Hargrove and Thompson families to their very cores. The Hargrove Foundation's annual charity gala was in full swing. The glittering ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, filled with New York's elite champagne, flowed freely. Diamonds sparkled under crystal chandeliers, and the air buzzed with gossip and laughter. Vivian Hargrove stood at the center of it all, resplendent in a designer gown, holding court with a group of socialites. Her laughter, practiced and hollow, rang out over the crowd. "Vivian, darling," cooed Beatrice Van Houten, her voice syrupy sweet. "Where's that lovely daughter of yours? I was so hoping Harrison might have a chance to dance with her tonight." Vivian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, you know young people these days. Always so busy, Sophia sends her regrets." But she had. A prior engagement she simply couldn't get out of. As the group clucked sympathetically, Vivian's mind raced. Where was Sophia? Her daughter had been increasingly evasive lately, always with some excuse for missing these important social events. It wasn't like her. Something was going on, and Vivian was determined to get to the bottom of it. Across town, in a small, warmly lit restaurant in the West Village, Sophia sat across from Jack, her eyes shining with happiness. The candlelight flickered across her face, softening her features and making her look younger, more vulnerable. "I can't believe we're really doing this," Sophia said, reaching across the table to take Jack's hand. "Telling our families, I mean. Are you nervous?" Jack squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "Terrified," he admitted with a rueful smile, "but also excited, Sophia. I love you. Whatever happens, we're in this together." Sophia nodded, taking a deep breath. "I love you too, Jack. More than I ever thought possible. I wish I could make my mother understand. She has such a narrow view of the world, of what success and happiness look like." Jack's eyes darkened for a moment. "Yeah, I know the type. But hey, who knows? Maybe when she sees how happy we are, she'll come around." As the young couple shared a hopeful smile, neither could have imagined the web of secrets and lies that was about to unravel around them. Back at the gala, Vivian excused herself from her social circle, slipping away to a quiet corner. She pulled out her phone, dialing a familiar number. "Charles? It's Vivian. I need you to do some digging for me. Find out where Sophia's been going, who she's been seeing. Something's not right, and I intend to find out what it is." As she ended the call, Vivian's gaze fell on a man across the room, Victor Blackwell. He caught her eye and raised his glass in a mocking toast. Vivian felt a chill run down her spine. Victor was a ruthless businessman, known for his aggressive takeovers and disregard for ethical boundaries. What was he doing here? Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Edward Thompson sat at his small kitchen table, poring over documents spread out before him. His latest agricultural innovation, a drought-resistant strain of wheat that could revolutionize farming in arid regions, was nearly ready for patenting. But the process was complex, and time was not on his side. A coughing fit seized him, and Edward doubled over, his body shaking. When it passed, he straightened up, wiping his mouth with a trembling hand. The clock on the wall seemed to mock him, its ticking a constant reminder of the precious time slipping away. "I have to finish this," Edward muttered to himself. "For Jack, for the future." Little did Edward know that his groundbreaking work had caught the attention of powerful and unscrupulous individuals. Victor Blackwell's presence at the Hargrove Gala was no coincidence. He had caught wind of Edward's innovation and was determined to acquire it, by any means necessary. As the night wore on, the various players in this unfolding drama moved like pieces on a chessboard, each unaware of the other's movements, yet all inexorably drawn together by the threads of fate. Sophia and Jack, lost in their own world of love and hope, made plans for their future, blissfully unaware of the storms gathering on the horizon. Vivian, driven by her need for control and her narrow vision of success, set in motion a chain of events that would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Edward, racing against time and his own mortality, worked tirelessly to secure his legacy, not realizing that his efforts had attracted the attention of those who would stop at nothing to take what he had created. And lurking in the shadows, Victor Blackwell plotted and schemed, seeing in the Thompson family's innovation an opportunity to expand his empire, regardless of the human cost. As the city that never sleeps, pulsed with life and energy, secrets simmered beneath the surface, ready to boil over and change the lives of the Hargroves and Thompsons forever. The stage was set for confrontations and revelations that would test the bonds of family, the power of love, and the true meaning of success and integrity. The following week, tension hung in the air like an impending thunderstorm. Sophia paced nervously in her apartment, rehearsing the words she would use to tell her mother about Jack. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jack. "Ready for tonight. Remember, no matter what happens, we're in this. Together, I love you." Sophia smiled, drawing strength from his words. She took a deep breath and headed out, steeling herself for the confrontation, to come across town. Vivian Hargrove sat in her study, a glass of scotch in hand, staring at the file her private investigator had delivered, photos of Sophia with Jack, at farmers markets, in Central Park, outside a modest Brooklyn apartment. Vivian's lips thinned as she flipped through the images. "A farmer's son," she muttered, disgust evident in her voice. "Of all the unsuitable choices." The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Vivian quickly tucked the file away and smoothed her features into a mask of polite interest. It was time to find out what her daughter had been hiding. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Edward Thompson adjusted his tie, looking uncomfortable in the suit Jack had insisted he wear for their special dinner. His son hadn't told him much, only that he was finally going to meet Sophia and that it was important to make a good impression. "Dad, you ready?" Jack called from the living room. "We don't want to be late." Edward sighed, casting one last glance at the documents spread across his desk. Patent applications, research notes, and financial projections. He'd have to finish reviewing them later. Tonight was about Jack, about this girl who had captured his son's heart. Despite his misgivings about her family, Edward was determined to keep an open mind. "Coming, son," he called back, closing the door to his makeshift office. As father and son made their way to the upscale restaurant where they were to meet Sophia, neither could have anticipated the powder keg they were walking into. At the Hargrove penthouse, Sophia arrived, her heart pounding. She found her mother in the living room, sipping scotch and wearing an expression that sent a chill down Sophia's spine. "Mom," Sophia began, her voice quavering slightly, "there's something I need to tell you." Vivian raised an eyebrow, her voice deceptively calm. "Oh, and what might that be, darling? Perhaps about your new friend?" Sophia's eyes widened. "You know about Jack?" "Jack?" Vivian spat the name like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "Is that what you call him? That farmer's son you've been slumming around with?" Sophia flinched as if she'd been slapped. "Mom, it's not like that. Jack is kind, intelligent, hard-working." "He's beneath you," Vivian interrupted, her composure finally cracking. "A Thompson, for God's sake, do you have any idea what associating with people like that could do to our reputation? To your future?" As mother and daughter faced off, their voices rising, neither noticed the sleek black car pulling up outside their building. Across town, Jack and Edward arrived at the restaurant, a high-end establishment that made Edward feel out of place despite his suit. As they were led to a private dining room, Jack's phone buzzed. He frowned at the message. "Everything okay, son?" Edward asked, noticing Jack's expression. Jack shook his head, looking worried. "It's from Sophia. There's been a change of plans. Her mother found out about us and things aren't going well. She wants us to come to their penthouse instead." Edward's heart sank. He had a bad feeling about this, but seeing the determination in his son's eyes, he knew there was no turning back now. "All right," he said, squaring his shoulders. "Let's go face the music." As they hailed a cab, Edward couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into a storm. If only he knew how right he was. Back at the Hargrove penthouse, the argument between Sophia and Vivian had reached a fever pitch. "You can't control my life forever, Mom," Sophia shouted, tears of frustration in her eyes. "I love Jack, and I'm going to be with him whether you approve or not." Vivian's face contorted with rage. "Love? You think you know anything about love? You're throwing away everything I've worked for, everything I've built for you, for some roll in the hay with a farmer." Just then, the elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to reveal Jack and Edward. The room fell silent as the two groups stared at each other, the tension palpable. Vivian's eyes narrowed as she took in Edward's weathered face. Recognition dawned, quickly followed by disbelief. And then disgust. "You," she hissed. "The man from the plane. This is your son?" Edward's jaw tightened as he recognized Vivian. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said stiffly. "We meet again." Sophia and Jack exchanged confused glances. "You two know each other?" Sophia asked. Before anyone could respond, the elevator dinged again. All eyes turned to see Victor Blackwell step into the penthouse, a predatory smile on his face. "Well, well," Victor said, his voice smooth as silk. "What a fortuitous gathering, the Hargroves and the Thompsons all in one place. How convenient." Vivian's face paled. "Victor, what are you doing here?" Victor's smile widened. "Why, I'm here to discuss business, of course. You see, I've recently become very interested in agricultural innovations, particularly those developed by one Edward Thompson." Edward stiffened, his hand instinctively going to his chest where he kept a flash drive with all his research. "How do you know about that?" he demanded. Victor chuckled. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, in my line of work, very little stays secret for long. And your work, well, let's just say it's attracted quite a bit of attention." As the group stood frozen, the air thick, with tension and unspoken accusations, it was clear that the carefully constructed worlds of both the Hargroves and the Thompsons were about to collide in spectacular fashion. Secrets were poised to spill out, alliances would be tested, and the true nature of love, family, and ambition would be laid bare. The storm had arrived, and no one in that room would emerge unscathed. The tension in the Hargrove penthouse was thick enough to cut. With a knife, Victor Blackwell's unexpected arrival had thrown everyone off balance, and the room crackled with unspoken questions and simmering resentments. Vivian was the first to recover, her social instincts kicking in despite her shock. "Victor," she said, her voice strained but polite, "while it's always a pleasure, I'm afraid you've caught us at a rather inopportune moment. Perhaps we could reschedule?" Victor's smile didn't waver. "Oh, I think not, Vivian. You see, this moment is precisely why I'm here." He turned his gaze to Edward Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, I've been following your work with great interest. Your innovations in drought-resistant crops could change the face of agriculture as we know it. I'm here to make you an offer, one that could secure your legacy and your son's future." Edward's eyes narrowed. "And how exactly did you come to know about my research, Mr. Blackwell?" "That information isn't public." Victor waved a hand dismissively. Details. What matters is the opportunity I'm presenting. Blackwell Industries has the resources to take your work global. Think of the impact, the lives you could change." Jack stepped forward, placing a protective hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad, what's he talking about? What research?" Edward sighed, the weight of his secret suddenly feeling unbearable. "Son, there's something I haven't told you. My work these past few years, it's been leading up to something big. A new strain of wheat that can thrive in arid conditions. It could revolutionize farming in drought-prone regions. Sophia's eyes widened with understanding. That's why you've been so busy. Why you always seemed so tired but excited, Jack. Your father's work could help millions. Vivian scoffed, unable to contain herself. Please. As if a simple farmer could achieve something like that, Victor. Surely you're not serious about doing business with these people? Her words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Jack's face hardened, and he turned to Sophia. Is this what you've been dealing with? This constant judgment and condescension? Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Mom's always been like this. She can't see past social status and bank accounts. She doesn't understand that there's more to life than that. Victor cleared his throat, clearly enjoying the drama unfolding before him. As fascinating as this family squabble is, I'm here to talk business, Mr. Thompson. My offer stands full funding for your research, state-of-the-art facilities, and a very generous compensation package. All you have to do is sign over the rights to your work. Edward hesitated, the temptation clear on his face. But then he shook his head. No, I appreciate the offer, Mr. Blackwell. But my work isn't about money or fame. It's about helping people, about leaving the world a little better than I found it. I won't risk having that vision corrupted by corporate greed. Victor's smile faded, replaced by a cold, hard look. I was hoping you'd be reasonable, Mr. Thompson. But if you won't cooperate willingly, there are other ways to acquire what I want. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Jack stepped in front of his father, his stance protective. You stay away from him. I don't know who you think you are, but you can't just barge in here and threaten people. Vivian, who had been watching the exchange with growing alarm, suddenly spoke up. Victor, what exactly is going on here? How do you know about this man's work? And why are you so interested in it? Victor turned to her, his expression mocking. Oh, Vivian, always so concerned with appearances, never seeing what's right in front of you. Your obsession with status and your disdain for those you consider beneath you. It's made you blind. Blind to the fact that this simple farmer you so despise might just hold the key to solving world hunger. Blind to the fact that your daughter has found true love with a man of substance and character, and blind to the fact that your own husband has been embezzling from your family's foundation for years. The room fell silent, everyone staring at Victor in shock. Vivian's face had gone pale, her hand gripping her glass so tightly it was in danger of shattering. What did you just say? She whispered. Victor's smile was cruel now. Oh yes, your precious Charles has been siphoning off funds for years. How do you think I knew about Mr. Thompson's research? Your husband sold the information to me, hoping to cover his tracks before the auditors caught up with him. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mom, is this true? Did Dad really? Vivian's composure crumbled, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. How could I not have known? As the Hargroves grappled with this shocking revelation, Edward stepped forward, his face set with determination. Mr. Blackwell, I don't know what game you're playing, but I want no part of it. My work is not for sale, not to you or anyone else. Now I think it's time we left. Victor's eyes flashed dangerously. You're making a big mistake, Thompson. I always get what I want, one way or another. Jack moved to stand beside his father, with Sophia joining them. The three of them presented a united front against Victor's threats and Vivian's crumbling world. We're leaving now, Jack said firmly. And if you or anyone else tries to come after my father or his work, you'll have me to deal with. As they turned to go, Sophia paused, looking back at her mother. Vivian sat slumped in her chair, looking older and more vulnerable than Sophia had ever seen her. Mom, Sophia said softly, I'm sorry about Dad, but maybe this is a chance for you to see things differently, to understand what really matters in life. With that, Sophia joined Jack and Edward in the elevator, leaving behind a shattered Vivian and a fuming Victor. As the elevator doors closed, Edward turned to his son and Sophia, his expression grave. I'm sorry you both got caught up in this, but I'm afraid it's not over. Victor Blackwell is a dangerous man, and he won't give up easily. Jack squeezed Sophia's hand, his jaw set with determination. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. All of us. As they stepped out into the night, the city lights twinkling around them. They knew that. Their lives had irrevocably changed. The truth had come out, secrets had been exposed, and the battle lines had been drawn. What none of them realized was that the biggest revelation was yet to come, a truth that would shake both families to their very foundations and test the strength of their newfound bonds. The week following the confrontation at the Hargrove penthouse was a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Sophia had moved out of her mother's home, taking up temporary residence in Jack's modest Brooklyn apartment. Edward, concerned about the safety of his research, had moved his work to a secure location, enlisting the help of trusted colleagues to protect his innovations. Vivian Hargrove, meanwhile, had retreated from public life, holed up in her penthouse as she grappled with the betrayal of her husband and the upheaval of her carefully constructed world. The news of Charles Hargrove's embezzlement had broken, sending shockwaves through New York's high society. It was against this backdrop of chaos and uncertainty that Edward Thompson made a decision, gathering Jack, Sophia, and to everyone's surprise, Vivian, in his small living room. He prepared to share the secret he'd been carrying for far too long. "I asked you all here today because there's something I need to tell you," Edward began, his voice steady, despite the gravity of the moment. "Something I should have shared a long time ago." Jack leaned forward, concern etched on his face. "Dad, what is it? Is everything okay?" Edward took a deep breath. "No, son, it's not. The truth is, I'm sick. I have a rare progressive disease, the doctors. They've given me a few years at most." The room fell silent, the weight of Edward's words settling over them like a heavy blanket. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jack sat frozen, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. It was Vivian, surprisingly, who broke the silence. "Is that why you've been working so hard on your research? You're trying to leave a legacy?" Edward nodded, a sad smile on his face. "Partly, yes, I wanted to. Create something that would make a difference, something that would provide for Jack's future when I'm gone. But it's more than that. This work, it has the potential to help millions of people. I couldn't bear the thought of it falling into the wrong hands, of it being used for profit instead of the greater good." Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice raw with emotion. "All this time you've been carrying this alone. I could have helped. I could have—" "You have helped, son," Edward said gently. "Your love, your support, seeing you grow into the man you are, that's given me more strength than you know." Sophia moved to Jack's side, wrapping her arm around him in silent support. Vivian watched the scene unfold, feeling like an intruder in this intimate family moment. Yet something about Edward's quiet dignity, his selfless dedication to his work and his son, stirred something within her. "Mr. Thompson," Vivian said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, I owe you an apology. My behavior, my judgment, it was unfair and cruel. I see now that I've been measuring success and worth by the wrong standards." Edward nodded, accepting her words. "Thank you, Mrs. Hargrove. But it's not just me you should be apologizing to." Vivian turned to Sophia, tears welling in her eyes. "Sophia, darling, I've been so blind. Can you ever forgive me?" Sophia hesitated for a moment before moving to embrace her mother. "It's a start, Mom. We have a lot to work through, but I'm willing to try if you are." As mother and daughter shared a tentative moment of reconciliation, Jack turned back to his father. "Dad, what can we do? There must be treatments. Specialists we can see." Edward shook his head. "I've explored all the options, son. Now, I just want to focus on finishing my work and spending time with you, with all of you." He added, including Sophia in his gaze. Vivian cleared her throat. "Perhaps I can help with that, the Hargrove Foundation. What's left of it after Charles's mess? We have connections in the medical world. I can make some calls, see if there are any experimental treatments or trials you might be eligible for." Edward looked surprised but grateful. "Thank you, Mrs. Hargrove. That's very kind of you." As the group sat together processing the weight of Edward's revelation, a knock at the door startled them. Jack moved to answer it, tensing when he saw who was on the other side. Victor Blackwell stood in the hallway, but gone was his usual smug demeanor. Instead, he looked haggard, almost desperate. "I need to speak with Edward Thompson," he said without preamble. "It's urgent." Edward moved to the door, his expression wary. "Mr. Blackwell, I thought I made myself clear. My work is not for sale." Victor shook his head. "This isn't about buying your research. It's about my daughter." A collective gasp went. Through the room, Victor continued, his voice breaking. "She has a rare condition. The doctors say she needs a specialized diet, one that her body can tolerate. Your drought-resistant crops, they might be her only hope." The room fell silent as the implications of Victor's words sank in Edward's. Work, which he had guarded so fiercely, now held the potential to save not just millions of unknown faces, but the life of one specific child, the daughter of the very man who had threatened him. Edward's face softened, the lines of worry giving way to compassion. "Mr. Blackwell, please, come in. Tell us more about your daughter's condition." As Victor stepped into the apartment, the atmosphere shifted. Gone was the ruthless businessman, replaced by a worried father. He sank into a chair, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Her name is Lily," Victor began, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's only 6. The doctors say her body can't process nutrients properly from most foods. Your drought-resistant wheat. It has a unique protein structure that could be exactly what she needs." Jack and Sophia exchanged glances, their earlier anger towards Victor melting into sympathy. Vivian, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Victor, why didn't you just explain this from the beginning? Why all the threats and underhanded tactics?" Victor laughed bitterly. "In my world, Mrs. Hargrove, showing vulnerability is a death sentence. I've spent so long being the shark in the tank, I forgot how to ask for help." Edward nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, Mr. Blackwell. More than you know." He glanced at Jack, a silent understanding passing between them. "I, too, know what it's like to face the prospect of leaving your child behind." The room fell silent as Edward's words sank in. Victor looked up, realization dawning on his face. "You're ill," he said. It wasn't a question. Edward nodded. "Yes, and like you, I've been fighting to secure a future, for my son, and for all those who could benefit from my work." Victor stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. "Then we have more in common than I thought, Mr. Thompson. Perhaps there's a way we can help each other." Jack stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in. "Dad, you don't owe this man anything after everything he's done." "Jack," Sophia interrupted gently, placing a hand on his arm, "I think we should hear him out." Edward smiled at Sophia gratefully before turning back to Victor. "What did you have in mind, Mr. Blackwell?" Victor took a deep breath. "A partnership, not an acquisition, but a true collaboration. Blackwell Industries has the resources to fast-track your research to get these crops into production quickly. We could set up a foundation, independent from both our companies, to oversee the distribution, ensuring it goes to those who need it most." Edward's eyes lit up with interest. "And your daughter would be just one of many children who could benefit," Victor finished. "I'm not asking for special treatment, Mr. Thompson. Just a chance to be part of something that could change lives, including my daughter's." The room buzzed with the potential of this unexpected turn of events. Vivian, who had been watching the exchange with growing interest, suddenly spoke up. "I think I might be able to help with that," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "The Hargrove Foundation may have taken a hit, but we still have connections. We could help set up this new organization, ensure it's run ethically and efficiently." Sophia stared at her mother in amazement. "Mom, are you serious?" Vivian nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's time I started using my influence for something worthwhile, don't you think?" As the group began to discuss the possibilities, the atmosphere in the room transformed. The tension and suspicion that had dominated their earlier interactions gave way to excitement and hope. Edward's research, born from his desire to leave a lasting legacy, was becoming something bigger than any of them had imagined. Hours passed as they talked, planned, and dreamed. By the time the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows of Edward's modest apartment, the outlines of a remarkable partnership had emerged. Edward's innovation would be developed and distributed through a new independent foundation. Blackwell Industries would provide the necessary resources and infrastructure, while the restructured Hargrove Foundation would leverage its social and political connections to ensure the project received the support it needed. Jack and Sophia, with their unique blend of agricultural knowledge and social conscience, would play key roles in overseeing the foundation's work. As the meeting wound down, Edward stood, looking around at the unlikely group gathered in his living room. "I never could have imagined this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What started as a personal mission has become something so much greater." Victor, looking more human than he had in years, extended his hand to Edward. "Mr. Thompson, Edward, thank you. Not just for Lily, but for showing me there's a better way to do business, to live life." As they shook hands, Vivian approached Sophia and Jack. "I owe you both an apology," she said softly. "Sophia, you saw the goodness in Jack and his family long before I could. And Jack, I misjudged you terribly. I hope you can forgive me, and that perhaps we can start fresh." Sophia embraced her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Mom, of course we can." Jack, his arm around. Sophia nodded. "Life's too short for grudges, Mrs. Hargrove. We're family now, all of us." As the group prepared to leave, making plans to meet again, soon to hammer out the details of their new venture, there was a sense of renewal in the air. Lives that had been driven by fear, ambition, and narrow definitions of success had been transformed by the power of compassion, collaboration, and love. Edward, watching as his son and Sophia said their goodbyes to the others, felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He may not have much time left, but he knew now that his legacy was secure, not just in his groundbreaking work, but in the connections forged this day, in the lives that would be changed for the better. As the door closed behind their guests, Jack turned to his father. "Dad, I want you to know I'm proud of you, not just for your work, but for who you are, the way you handled everything today. That's the kind of man I want to be." Edward pulled his son into a tight embrace, his eyes glistening. "You already are, son. You already are." Sophia watched the tender moment between father and son, her heart full. She thought of her own mother, of the journey they had ahead to rebuild their relationship. It wouldn't be easy, but days like today gave her hope. As the small family stood together in the fading light, there was a sense that while challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The future, once uncertain and fraught with conflict, now held the promise of purpose, reconciliation, and most importantly, love. In the end, it wasn't wealth or status that had brought them all together, but the simple, powerful truth that every life has value, every person has something to contribute. And in recognizing that truth, they had not only changed their own lives, but set in motion a chain of events that would touch countless others. As night fell over the city, stars twinkling in the sky above, the Thompson apartment glowed with warmth and hope, a beacon of what's possible when people open their hearts and come together for a greater good.